Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson, and it's my pleasure to have with us tonight once again, Dr. Buck Melton.
Greetings.
Buck, I know you're a little tired. I don't know if the exhaustion of the day's activities renders your normal comments to the American people, little witticisms you'd like to toss out there. Is there one you've kept in reserve, or?
Well, I think anybody who's following the election is a little bit tired right now, but I would say on the eve of the election, I would quote Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., "To doubt one's own first principles is the mark of a civilized man."
Yes. Well, all right on that comment. Maybe we can talk a little bit about some of the issues that confront the American people in this electoral cycle, and one of them would be tariffs. Now, tariffs have been a long-standing issue in America. Is that right? I mean, initially, that's where the federal government received its money, and when those tariffs were in place, they protected industries, particularly in the North. Southerners didn't like that because it raised the cost of their things they bought. And I think in South Carolina, they considered leaving the Union because of the tariff issue.
Well, partly because of the tariff. By the time we got to the South Carolina problem, the tariff was also a stand-in for the slavery issue. But yes, there was no federal income tax until 1913, and tariffs were the major source of revenue until then. And of course, tariffs can serve two functions. First of all, as a source of revenue, a government has to have operating funds. But the Hamiltonian program from very early on preached the idea that we needed to keep American money in America, investing it in American industry. And the way to do that would be to artificially inflate the price of imports, a modern take on mercantilism. And I am very much out of favor, but I actually tend to still agree with that today. And those tariffs actually were finally enacted by 1816.
Well, it depends in some ways on how severe the tariffs are. There's a fragile world order there. There are 8.1 billion people in the planet, and there's an enormous dependence on the U.S. Market for those people everywhere. And so many countries, presumably this is an argument against this, would suffer greatly, particularly Europeans, I think. They would really get a bad nip here with their economies. Does the U.S. have an obligation to the world order, to poor countries, if to say that send us their goods? And I think there are all kinds of tariff policies that American people are not particularly familiar with. I think some countries get favored, treatment. One of them is Haiti. I think their tariffs are non-existent or very low to support their very fragile nation. Do you have any comments about that, our obligations to the rest of the world?
Well, if you want to put on a nationalist face, you would go, I believe it was Lord Palmerston who said that a nation has no permanent friends, only permanent interests. And I don't think we can afford to be just open-armed generous to the entire planet. Now, that's a gross generalization, of course, but there may be some countries that it's in our interest to help develop, either for humanitarian interests or for reciprocity. But then you've got other countries that might engage in dumping, and yes, I'm looking at you, China. And China is, of course, following a very Hamiltonian policy of its own, while we are following the quote-unquote enlightened free trade policy. And we just take a shellacking because of that. And that's something that concerns me a great deal. Now, the people who bray the loudest about free trade tend to be upper income groups in the United States, and they talk about globalism leads to more efficiency and that sort of thing. But the fact is, what that has meant is it has greatly widened the wealth gap in the United States. The rich have become much richer, and the poor have not been able to find the sort of manufacturing jobs that they need. Apple, for instance, designs these wonderful cell phones in Cupertino, California, and then ships all the jobs offshore to China where the phones are manufactured, just increasing the already wide wealth gap among the American electorate.
Well, it's complicated, isn't it? Income inequality is not a simple one-for-one thing to discuss, but we sort of get into comparative advantage, which is the big story about why many people are against tariffs. So the idea is, well, we'll be very productive for high tech things, and all the manual labor will go elsewhere, and there won't be jobs for many people that would perform manual labor in the U.S. or something like that. They'll all go to Mexico or Central America or China, Southeast Asia. They'll make the tennis shoes, they'll do this, they'll do that, and we'll get a cheaper product back. And then what supposedly happens is all the aggrieved workers that don't have jobs, there's income transference to help them. So you get a little money from this or that, an extra child gets you some extra money, your health care is provided for. That's at least the idea. And then in looking at the situation, one thing that's impressive now is that there's a very low unemployment rate. And another way to say this is there's a denominator and a numerator in here, and actually fewer people look for jobs in the U.S. One reason being that the income transference allows them not to work, so to speak. Now, do you have any comments about that particularly?
Well, yes. First of all, the income transference is being funded partially by budget deficits. And these budget deficits, in turn, are being funded by investments or loans that we are getting from foreign governments, including China. At the same time that is happening, it's having impact on the American work ethic and also destroying our domestic manufacturing capability, which means in the matter of national security, if we were to go to war against these foreign suppliers, we would not be able to make up the shortfall ourselves. And for instance, the idea of semiconductors. The American semiconductor producing facilities are almost non-existent now because we've offshored them. And you know how crucial they are to any sort of modern life. If we got into a war with our foreign suppliers, or even if our foreign suppliers found themselves threatened by hostile forces, that could interdict that supply to us, we would be completely out of luck. The idea of us ramping up to see a sort of wartime productivity that we saw, for instance, in World War II would simply be off the table. And frankly, given international tensions, that frightens me considerably. We have essentially been addicted to this foreign supply by the low prices at Walmart. But within the first few weeks of any sort of major conflict, those shelves are going to be completely bare.
Well, we sort of segue into a difficult situation, which is the role of nation states in a complicated world growing closer and closer together. Flying from pillar to post is pretty easy. People are immigrating, coming across the border. All kinds of events are taking place. New products are emerging, new methodologies are appearing. There's an enormous amount of change, saying all those things. And navigating that sea is pretty rough. A question for me that I ask is, just to make a list of the advantages and the disadvantages of tariffs. So I could say the advantages would be, well, the government gets some money. Another advantage would be, okay, we can protect industries, as you mentioned. That would be a useful thing. Another thing is that there might be new industries might occur as we don't have this access to products that are labor intensive, so to speak. So if you don't have people that are let's say they can pick peaches, to make it a sort of a labor example, then we'll have special machines will be created to do it. If we don't have people to act as waiters in restaurants, well, we'll have a way that we just push buttons. So there could be a lot of innovation that could take place. that might take care of the problem. And then finally, the question would be the change in consumptive patterns. So the idea that we want to, I don't know what we want. We want something that's very inexpensive, tennis balls, I don't know, whatever tennis balls are, we'll have very inexpensive tennis balls, and we'll then start to, we won't use as many tennis balls. We'll be very careful with the tennis balls we use because they'll be very expensive. So the consumptive patterns might change. Those seem to me, I mean, just a list of some of the advantages. And then I'll finally say this. When people discuss the tariffs, and we'll now speak on the other side, all around the world, economists say this is a terrible idea that's going to destroy the world. They're very, very much against it. I think the number that's left out is what happens to the gross national product in the U.S. It might really be stimulated by this. There might be a lot of stimulation, and I think when people look at these numbers, they just say, well, if the prices go up by this amount, the American GNP will fall, and they don't look at the secondary impacts. Well, that would be an argument for tariffs. And now I'll let you present the arguments against tariffs.
Well, I've largely given those arguments against them. I do think that the economists now, for the last generation or two, have actually since the time of Ricardo, have had this global idea, and they are looking at the abstract idea of economic efficiency, and they are not looking at it from a position of realpolitik. For every year of peace, there have been 400 years of war. And so the people who take this sanguine view that we're moving, as you like to quote in those Churchillian terms, the broad sunlit uplands, are not taking account of the tremendous international tensions that we see today and what's going to happen when those global markets are disrupted. It reminds me of a book called The Great Illusion that was published shortly before World War I that maintained that a general European war was simply impossible due to the global interconnections of the economy. And when that war did in fact happen, it did disrupt that economy tremendously and brought about essentially the downfall of the European era, the protestations of the economists of the day notwithstanding. Given the tremendous tensions that we have with the East Asian markets, which I think would be the primary target of those tariffs, it is extremely short-sighted of us to outsource the most basic productive industries, which the low tariffs and the globalist economists have managed to get us to do.
Well, I'm going to try and make the argument for tariffs. Not against tariffs. I'm going to make the argument against tariffs. So the fragility of the U.S. is there. We have a very fragile country, and their big tariffs suddenly appear. And the argument is this is going to make things more expensive. The people that depend on tennis balls, I would say, or I'll pick another example, tennis shoes. Really good tennis shoes that super duper tennis shoes that come from Indonesia. And they really have to have those tennis shoes, and their price doubles, all kinds of, it should cause without, I think I accept this idea. Just looking at the tariffs alone, there's going to be inflation. It's going to encourage inflation. There are other factors that on the other side of the street that might be against it, but in general, the expenses should go up on things that you purchase, and a huge amount of things Americans purchase are from overseas, and where the inflation is going to hit is generally people that are going paycheck to paycheck. And the fragility of the country is such that I'm not sure how well the country can handle a major inflation increase that preferentially hits people with more modest income arrangements. That would be an argument against it. Another
well, if I could
you may
address that
speak.
one.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying that there are not problems. I'm not arguing that we're going to have this idyllic existence if we raise tariffs. And if you will accept my analogy as of the low prices as an addiction, breaking an addiction is always painful. Going cold turkey or even easing yourself off the morphine is not without pain. But in this case, the income redistribution that you've already championed, we could simply do more of it during a time of quantitative easing while we break that addiction and begin to rebuild an American basic productive infrastructure. We're already $35 trillion in debt. What's another $10 trillion among social classes?
Well, you actually made it a point that I was slowly getting to, but you jumped to it. That's good. The idea is that if we had these tariffs, we'd have to consider who was going to be impacted by it, and we might have to make some special accommodation for anyone that was really going to be tremendously injured by tariffs. I think that's a fair statement. The other issue would be how severe or global the impact would be. Now, you use the narcotics addiction as an example. Well, there's a two-way street for this addiction. The other group of people that are addicted to it are the producers in other countries. So suddenly, everyone is out of work. People, what am I going to do? The factories are closing. All kinds of social upheaval takes place. And in looking at the world order, if you want to say that, our country depends on a certain world stability. If, in fact, let's just say some terrible event takes place in Mexico and Central America, and we're a prosperous country, then the immigration issue, illegal immigration issue, is going to increase. Additionally, our enemies, such as they are, would in some ways be delighted by this tariff policy. All kinds of countries that follow the U.S. along would in fact look for a new champion, in which Moscow is trying to put together. And so it might have a major upheaval in our overseas relationships and stabilizing the world under difficult circumstances. And were the rest of the world to suddenly just get this terrible nip, the U.S. markets are closed to them, I think we'd have severe repercussions everywhere. And you could say, all right, well, it's going to be dangerous. Well, what are some things that are going to happen? Well, the U.S. is the bully boy out there. Is it going to be possible to easily travel around? Is there going to be resentment, frayed international relationships, all kinds of things that we would not anticipate would happen? And so this is I think it's a solitary maneuver. We're just going to push a button and we'll see what happens. And here's some things that are good for us, and there's some things that are bad for us. But how can we really balance those out easily? And I'm now going to just make the comment that the idea needs appropriate dissection.
Okay, well, let's
right,
before we go there, let me respond to that one.
All right, great.
Obviously, I'm not saying that there will not be repercussions, and perhaps the best example of that in our history, other than the Smoot-Hawley tariff, was I think the much more particular example was the Wilson-Gorman tariff of 1893, which essentially caused the Cuban Revolution in 1894, 1895. So, and nobody's talking about just pushing a button and closing our markets completely. No one's talking about an embargo, or if they are, I'm certainly not talking about that. You have to take a nuanced approach to this sort of thing. But the fact is, even if it starts to cause instability, the first thing is they can just do better. They can produce a better product. People will presumably pay a higher price for a better product. And secondly, if there is a sign of serious economic or political instability, this country has been one of the most generous in history in terms of foreign aid. We can use that tremendous leverage that we've got, using the full faith and credit of the United States government, to do a limited Marshall Plan of the affected areas. So that can certainly be accounted for.
Well, just to make a comment, the question is the severity of the tariff. If we're going to do any kind of tariff changes, How severe is it going to be, and what are going to be the impacts? The other issue that's out there is having the aggrieved countries put substantial tariffs on any product that we would send them. So there'd be a quid pro quo arrangement taking place. So our products would be not as easily obtainable. And
all part of the process of breaking the addiction. It's not going to be pleasant.
I'm not sure I would. You could say breathing is an addiction. I mean, it depends on. It's a pretty stiff word for our economic system.
Well, we can do without Nikes. We can't do without breathing.
Well, it depends. Some people.
I would not be one of them.
The analogy goes two ways, I guess you'd say. I accept that I'm rather severe in my analogy, but likewise, using the addiction issues, that would imply some moral weakness, something like that. I'm not sure.
Oh, not necessarily. I mean, that's 19th century thinking. If you've got a gene for alcoholism, if you're born a crack baby, that is certainly not a moral failing.
Well, I'm not going to go into words, but obviously words, ricochet around the room, and so for many people, addiction.
You were the one who brought up moral, not me.
Well, okay. And many people would say that addiction has a negative connotation.
I'm not worried how we got into it. I'm just worried about the effects
of the
addiction, of what I characterize as an addiction.
All right. And I would pick another phrase. Let's say our economic policies, and our economic policies are obviously, you could say, yes or no. At least on a temporary basis, they're really quite successful. So the country is in a temporary view. They're countries.
Look at the growing wealth gap. We are the greatest wealth gap in the last 5 or 10 years that we've ever been in this country. So if you're in that top 1%, yes, indeed, they have been successful. If you're in the bottom 10, 20, 30, 40, 50%, they have not been successful at all. A lot of that is due to the offshoring of jobs by that 1%.
Well, I won't ever kill it about wealth gap issues. I mean, let's see, what's the guy's name? Piketty, I didn't pronounce it correctly, the French economist. But when these gaps are put there, the income transference is not put in there. So for health care, whatever that is, that goes in. And so it makes the...
but again, I would say the income transference is illusory because we have gotten $35 trillion in debt by doing this so-called income transference. Instead, what we've actually been doing is taxing future generations to do that so-called transference, which is really not transference at all.
Well, just back to I will make my point, and then we can pursue the other defects that exist in the world. But I would say the income gap is overstated. I make that case, and by Piketty and the European economists saying how terrible America is and how great Europe appears. And the other thing is part of the exceptionalism of the country is that, well, you see all those people driving those big cars, I would like one, and the door is open for you to get one. And so it causes a certain amount of ambition in the country. In fact, that was recently, I think it was recently stated by the Norwegian, a big boy Norwegian economist about, well, one thing about America is that they do better than Europe because people are more ambitious. The doors are open to do whatever, and that might be an incentive for people to be innovative, do whatever. And then I would also make the case that as far as wealth gap goes, if you want to say that phrase, the very top part of it, there's when they go to with all the money they have, the tax system equalizes things in the end. They've got their death tax, and so what people do is they start foundations, they do this, they do that, and the wealth that's there, the assumption is we put the wealth situation there. This wealth is going to just be there forever. No, it's not. The government aggressively does something about capital accumulation. Moreover, the capital accumulation is in private hands as opposed to the government's hands. So the money can go for innovation, and agile economy can work well.
I think you're contradicting yourself. You're saying first that there is no capital accumulation, and then you say that there is capital accumulation, but it's in private hands.
No.
And it's also any good lawyer can put together trusts that can dodge a lot of that taxation very easily.
The operative word is a lot, and the tax law has changed, but in general, you dodge these arrangements. Nevertheless, it causes a social benefit when money flows into different kinds of
the
charity.
classic trickle down.
Well, once again, phrases.
John Maynard
once
Keynes
again,
would disagree.
I'm not sure that trickle down is the correct phrase for what goes on, but going back to the situation, but my argument would be that if you're on the other side of the fence for the economic arrangements, your welfare is being protected by many ways, by the government's making sure things are 1, 2, 3. The money is out there, is ready to make the country go forward, and it, as contrasted with Europe, which is you could say, well, we don't have a wealth gap here. Well, the way the economists put things together is not so obvious. They have a tax on consumption. They have a consumption of VAT. What really strikes everybody, there's no VAT here. Our economic taxation arrangements is progressive. So I think it's a fair, on that point, we're linking this to tariffs. We're trying to make a link. We're going back to the tariff story. What I come up with from this is I would be extremely careful with tariffs. And what we're really saying, and this is to me the important point, looking at the point of view of the world, what's going to be best for the 8 billion people out there? The best thing would be very low tariffs or non-existent tariffs for the 8 billion people on the earth, I think. For the people in a nation state, and particularly a prosperous nation state like the U.S., tariffs give us some heads up with the rest of the world and preserve some of our power, if you want to use that word. A stronger nation, a wealthier nation, presumably has more power to put their moral viewpoint to the forefront. Now, on the other hand, we have to really raise the question about the appropriateness of nation states in our world. Well, we haven't really gotten to that. But
well, I don't think, we've only got a couple minutes left. I don't
Yes.
think we could go into that. I do think that the globalists have this naive idea that nation states are passé. Ask the Israelis and people in Gaza that right now, or the Israelis and the Iranians, that I would argue, using your very own model of the reptile brain, which I've adopted very heavily.
Well, good for you, Buck.
I'm
I'm
happy,
happy.
I use it a great
I'm
deal
happy
in my classes.
some pearls
Yes,
I tossed before you have been received.
That is our default condition, and just bring us into a few moments of scarcity, and you will see exactly how relevant those nation states and tribal ethnicities matter. But I'm afraid that will have to wait until next time. We have to wind it up.
Well, all right. My final comment, Buck, is you've gone out there pretty far on a limb as far as as general economists, their viewpoint. On the other hand, that's a very salutary thing to consider.
Well, I'm just talking abstractly because obviously the tides of history are going your way and not mine.
This is not my way necessarily. I'm just presenting some of the issues.
Well, then it's going the economist's way. I don't see any serious move towards higher tariffs. So I'm just being contrarian.
Well, good for you. All right. We'll talk some more. Thank you. Thanks,
you.
Buck. Thank you.